So, a couple weeks ago, my ex, Che, also known as Fizzy Pop, on Twitter released a statement regarding our relationship. This was a just shy of 1 year relationship. It lasted from 2016 to 2017. We live in neighbouring cities, and we're about 3 hours apart by train. And my parents were unaware of this relationship. They're very religious, and I knew that if I told them I was going to see my girlfriend, they wouldn't have let me. So I told my parents that I was seeing my friend Harry in Sydney, and I was only able to go and visit her because Che convinced her mother to lie to my mother over the phone and spin the whole Harry story.
Recently, to those who are unaware, I've been accused of a 15-year-old boy when I was 19. That I'm some kind of and was aware of his age all along. This is categorically untrue and a complete lie. The supposed proof for these insane allegations is paper thin and embarrassingly wrong. I originally made a response on my subreddit, and I truly believe the evidence I provided was enough. And for a time it was.
This is my response to several allegations made against me, the most serious of which being that I assaulted a former friend and ex-partner of mine named Orion in Orlando, Florida on February 18th, 2018. This is patently false and completely untrue. Not only did I not assault Orion, I never had sexual contact with him in any way, shape, or form.
Hi everyone. So we're not going to have the same kind of fun, quirky greeting as normal because the topics that we're discussing today are fairly dark and a bit of a grim topic, but I think something that really needs to be elaborated on and discussed given its relevancy in the commentary space and just kind of an overall reality online. That being said, my description is going to stay the same as it normally does, so there's all the links and everything, sources, ways to support the channel, all that kind of stuff down below. Also, thank you to my channel members and patrons. That's going to be on the screen right now because I still want to thank you despite the content of this video. So, like I said, everything's going to be there, but I'm just not going to ramble on about it. For the parts of the video as well, normally, for those of you who are new to the channel, normally I format my videos in kind of a high school essay 5-paragraph format where there's an introduction, conclusion, and 3 parts, or what normally would be associated with body paragraphs. This one, however, is just in a whole bunch of sections, and they will be chaptered down below. You can click through them, skip stuff. So the first section of the video is going to be disclaimers, because that's how many we're going to need for some topics like this. The nature of this video, I'm going to be very upfront, is quite triggering. I have a bunch of other videos that are not like this. I have some that are more serious, some that are not. There's whole playlists. There's a whole playlist called Lighter Content and Lives if you do want to watch anything like that. Because this video is going to go deeply into topics of essay, internet discourse around allegations, victim blaming, false allegations, predatory behavior, and grooming. This video is going to talk about true as well as false allegations. With that being said, this video is not designed for people to victim blame or exclaim that allegations are not true. Very often, that is statistically incorrect and demonstrable through a lot of different forms of research. So I would not appreciate comments like that. I do see most of the comments they go through, so if I'm deleting, mind your business. Most of the conversations are going to be revolving around heterosexual relationships. There are some dynamics with allegations, such as the pyrocynical allegations and the quite allegations that we are going to be discussing today that do involve not heteronormative dynamics, meaning pyrocynical was with, I believe, a cis male, and White was a trans man. Finally, I ask for you to watch the entire video before making comments, or if you want to comment on a specific section, then finishing the section. Because these are types of things that a lot of people like to take out of context without giving it the required amount of nuance that it needs. And I think that with conversations like this, and the whole video is revolving around the idea that that nuance is entirely necessary and something that is far too often disregarded for the sake of scandal and for the sake of often platforming or boosting the platform of different creators. So now we're going to get into my first kind of primary section, meaning the internet discourse. Many like to equate the Me Too movement, which was originally a movement designed for women in Hollywood and non-cis male people in general, to come out against those that harmed them in the space. Typically people that were far more powerful than them, for example, older male co-stars, producers, directors, etc. So this is kind of the spark from the whole Harvey Weinstein deal that happened a few years ago. People have begun to equate this to a sort of cancel culture, which has thus festered into a sort of counterculture against people that claim that false allegations are primarily for a weapon for people to utilize, often AFAB people, which are used to get rid of or ruin the careers and those fame of those that they do not like. There is a very infamous clip about Andrew Tate discussing this.
I also don't believe men should be held hostage to the fact that any woman you've ever interacted with in your life, ever, at any point in the future, even 40 years later, can come forward and accuse you of something and fuck your life up. Because the problem is, it's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, but with this sexual assault bullshit, you're guilty until proven innocent. How the fuck am I going to prove a bitch is lying about something that happened in 1988? For the same reason she can't prove it happened, I can't prove it didn't happen. Giving every female in the Western world a weapon. That weapon can be used completely unfairly. What the Me Too era is saying is, you can never piss off a female, ever. If you do, they have a weaponized response. So what you're saying to me is not, you have to go through life and make sure you never assault a woman. What you're saying is, you have to make sure you go through life and never make a woman angry ever. Because if you make her angry, she might just call the police.
Sneeko has mentioned this. Aiden Ross has talked about this as kind of like Me Too as a form of cancel culture. And a lot of times what happens is either the allegations are misconstrued, the victim is silenced, paid off, or sometimes what happens is just the way they want to describe something doesn't really come across properly, and then it spirals out of control because of the internet environment around it, thus turning it into something considered a false allegation. An example of this is actually with the Pyrocynical situation, where the victim, or the supposed victim, because again, it's a bit unclear, Ivory was stating that they used the term grooming because they felt that that was the term that was supposed to be utilized. And a lot of that comes from the internet culture of glamorizing and trying to kind of make content out of allegations and issues that come ahead. Right? This reaction to the Me Too movement comes from a lot of red pill creators, right? You know, the kind of manosphere types, or, you know, the woman sphere types. Because there's like women that are doing it now for some reason. This being against the Me Too movement, they've positioned themselves as if they're combating some sort of sense of like this, some sort of power structure that these people are manipulating allegations on this like grand scale, which is not the case. But they're doing it as if the Me Too movement didn't have to emerge based on combating pre-existing structures of power that cause issues for all of those who are not cis hetero males in that circumstance, and white most of the time. And this is the mentality that a lot of even commentators have started to kind of form when seeing allegations online. So there's another side to this, however, and this is why I'm saying things like wait to comment until the section is done, because I'm positioning both sides. That's where a lot of people like to say I tend to be level-headed on things, but occasionally I do have positions, right? Obviously. So when the allegations do have a malicious intent, and the internet, especially on platforms like Twitter and YouTube, will take their opportunity to jump immediately on a statement that may not be substantiated and requires details from all parties. This creates a difficult reality that requires nuance, and the internet does not really give that to allegations, especially when creator anonymity is involved. And with Quite, for example, and Pyrocynical circa 2016, this is not the first time that something like this has happened. There have been a lot of issues with this in the internet space, and it seems like for some reason we're not learning. And I've even made mistakes in this. I reported on the boy in a band allegations when they were still in a phase of being quite unclear. And frankly, I still don't know what my position is, because on one hand, there's been rumors that they've been retracted, but at the same time, Boy in a Band has made no effort to respond to anything. No one's even come out on his behalf or mentioned anything. So I don't know where to sit on that, but my video has been moved to members only because some people do want to reference the video, but I don't really want it to be public. But I kept it, I guess, for lack of a better term, behind a paywall, not for the sake of making money, because I never proposed that that was the case, but because if people still wanted to see it, they could, but that they didn't. I don't know. Because I had it unlisted and then people were still finding it, but I want to have it private because it's like it never happened. So that's where I've kind of placed it. I don't know how I feel about that, but that's just me being honest. But let's discuss the internet anonymity in the kind of equation for all of this. So some creators value privacy for a multitude of reasons. Having an online presence can cause a multitude of issues in people's personal lives. It has for me. I'm trying to do a professional career right now, and there has been a ton of issues with me doing this as a job, but then the proposition on the opposite side is that I work a minimum wage job while already having to work full time for no money. So I'm not doing that. but the way of trying to negate or like kind of navigate around all of this is feeling impossible and causing tremendous stress in my life because the work environment has not necessarily caught up to the kind of social environment of the internet presence. A lot of that is jobs often wanting control of your life outside of the practice, which is, I think, a completely unreasonable reach if you're not spreading hate speech and you're not, directly slandering the company, then I think it's none of their business what you want to do otherwise, unless it causes direct danger to the practice. Again, that's just personal opinions coming into that, but that is a very valid reason that people want to value privacy online. But it reminds me a lot of Pyrocynical's, like, before he revealed his face when Keemstar accused him of being a pedo and soliciting messages from a 15, then 14, then 13-year-old from France. I am going to mention that later in the video, I'm going to draw further parallels to these allegations. I talked about these allegations in far more detail in my 2016 YouTube Part 1 video in the, I think, a section, it was just everyone versus Keemstar. When coming back to the nature of faceless creators, there's clearly a stalemate that comes into place where when something like this happens, as not only there's the issue that I mentioned previously to the aspect of professionalism, if they want to face the allegations directly and deal with the flack from those that are in disbelief, there's an added element of a pressure of face exposure. So in the sake of Pyrocynical and Quite, they were doxxed in the process. So if they continue to try to force the anonymity, they would just keep being brought up over and over and over again. That's an element of kind of difficulty that comes in with these particular types of creators. So the allegations can kind of come forward with less resistance. If they value their privacy, they could just not acknowledge the dox. But then they can't really not acknowledge the dox while also not acknowledging the allegations because those two have kind of intertwined. So it's either they must ditch their career in the name of being exposed or face the new reality of losing that anonymity that they value so greatly. In the case of Quite, for example, he was doxxed by the accuser, similar to Keemstar doxing Pyrocynical and other allegations alike with faceless creators. I believe this also happened with the process of Zaptai, but I'm not sure. But the point is, there have been people that have been essentially chased off the internet for the same reasons. One of those being Corpse Husbands had a lot of issues with this as well. Not for allegations, I mean, but for forced facial exposure. If I'm looking at my notes more directly, it's because sometimes I write sentences that are kind of complicated and I want to do justice to my scripting process because I think I wrote this over 5 hours. Like, not just like the research process, I mean like as in like just literally writing it. So I kind of want to stay true to how I phrased it. And I don't have the time to memorize these top to bottom. I apologize in advance. But essentially, if Pyro and Quite did not show their face either in the response or soon after, as those hesitant of the response to allegations may fixate on the need for the creator to stay anonymous, especially as anyone who wants to find their face can now. So Pyro, while not doing a face cam, did use the doxing photos in his response, and Quite just straight up had his face in the response video. Now to move on to the aspect of false allegations. When drawing comparisons, I feel like there's a situation that has happened to the content creator Slazo. This is often a parallel drawn, especially regarding Quite, because Quite was a perpetrator in pushing the narrative that Slazo was guilty of the allegations put on him in 2019. To summarize that situation very shortly, and I believe I go into more detail later, I do. An old partner of Slazo's from when he was a young teenager claimed that Slazo took advantage of her, similar to the Quite situation. The accusations were posted via Twitlonger on Twitter. So I will try to clip Slazo's video in here. The thing is, it is unlisted, and I'm not sure if he will claim it, because sometimes when creators unlist videos, they've put them in the content ID system. So if there's like a gap or like a jump, it's because I edited it out in post on YouTube Studio. So Slazo was not an anonymous creator, so there's less of a kind of vice or like a grip on the allegations in comparison to Quite and Pyrocynical. There was the difference where several very prominent YouTubers, including I'm Alex, who now just does like weird reaction content. I'm not a fan of I'm Alex. I find him to be very disingenuous and someone who is very kind of social climby in like a very toxic way that is seemingly never mutually beneficial to the other party. I also just think his content's kind of low effort. Quite, and then I have parentheses, interestingly enough, Squizzy, who I don't even know if they make videos anymore. Some others, including Hyojin, who was I don't know if she did YouTube. I knew she did a lot of drawing, like art stuff. who was dating Pyrocynical at the time, who boosted the allegations. Now, one of the most prominent videos on this was by Nicholas Diorio. I did watch his videos to research, so they are included in the description. Just because something is included in the description does not mean I agree with all the points in the video, nor do I agree with the creator's perspective. I just wanted to see what the perspectives were. Now, Nicholas Diorio states in his video that Pyrocynical and Dolan Dark participated in these allegations.
But before we get into these claims specifically, let's introduce the players. The players Alex mentioned straight away were involved some way, shape, or form with this. So the parties that have been involved are Dolan Dark, Shay, Pyrocynical, I'm Alex, Hyojin, Shay's current boyfriend, King Annie, Blues Danks, Weasterner, and Unicorn Powers. Turkey Tom also found out that Quite had been involved at some point as well. Now Alex tells me that his draft for the Twit Longer was not used, and he left for approximately 2 weeks only to read the final draft when it was posted and supported it anyways. He told me that Hyojin wrote the final draft and she was malicious. Alex stated that she cared more about Slazo losing subscribers than even Shay did. And when I asked why, he told me a few surprising details. For one, Alex said this group of friends often looks past allegations of sexual assault, so he wondered why they all went so hard on this one. When I asked if it was a competition thing, Alex responded saying that Slazo's main channel hadn't seen many uploads recently, but his Reddit channel is pulling in approximately $34,000 per month, and that is a very specific number. One that has been on my mind all week. Who just knows that? Naturally, I replied back to Alex questioning this and saying that it sounded like a red flag, but he insisted he still believes the allegations are true.
Now, I watched Primic's video and a couple of others, and they stated upon trying to go back, it doesn't seem like Pyrocynical and Dolan Dark really did anything besides just exist in a group chat. Take with that what you may. I'm just adding in that detail as well. And then this will kind of bleed into a bit of Pyro's most recent allegations. But let's begin with detailing Slazo's allegations from the summer of 2019. I recently rewatched a lot of content on this, and as I mentioned, all the videos will be in the description. Quite at the end of his video, talking about his allegations, does mention his role in the Slazo allegations as well.
A lot of people have brought up the Slazo situation from back in 2019 during this whole thing, saying that it's ironic I was part of pushing those allegations and now I'm suffering my own, like it's karma coming around. And I mean, on some level, I can't really say they're wrong. I don't mean in the idea that I knew the allegations were always fake and I was trying to use them to end his career. I did not do that, and I never would knowingly. I'm not certain where the idea of me being malicious in that situation first came from, but I'd been approached by someone I trusted and had other people I trusted vouching for them, and the evidence I'd seen at the time made me believe someone I knew had done something horrible. But with hindsight, it's a lot easier to see how careless and irresponsible I was being. It's because I saw Slazo as a friend that how I handled those allegations wasn't good enough. I failed him as a friend by believing what I saw wholesale and not doing the bare minimum of what he deserved, by not even waiting for him to give his side before making a judgment. An event that has now echoed itself in my life. I have felt guilty that he suffered like that, at least in part because of my negligence ever since, and now I can directly relate to him after going through all this shit. I feel like I owe that guy a third apology, and still nothing I do will make up entirely for what I helped put him through. Now, having gone through it for real myself and hearing people constantly say that I tried to end someone's career based on something I knew was a lie has been frustrating, especially because I had been putting up with this exact kind of public smearing on a lower level from Orion for ages, even before the Slazo stuff happened.
So let's summarize in more detail what happened to Slazo specifically. So Slazo's opening of his response video is actually extremely similar to Quite, from the amount of time for the response and apologizing for that, to the notes and the minimal editing.
I wanted to make a video regarding the situation as of a couple weeks ago. Some of you might be wondering why I took so long to make this response. That's mainly because I wanted a good but belated response. I've got a list of things here that I want to talk about.
This is my response to several allegations made against me, the most serious of which being that I sexually assaulted a former friend and ex-partner of mine named Orion in Orlando, Florida on February 18th, 2018. This is patently false and completely untrue. Not only did I not assault Orion, I never had any sexual contact with him in any way, shape, or form. I have a lot of evidence to share backing what I say in this video, including a recording of Orion giving a testimony of this exact interaction from late 2018 that directly contradicts his current version of events. I've prepared what I have to say ahead of time, as this is something I wanted to make sure I had my thoughts in order for when discussing, so if you see my eyes flitting back and forth, that's why.
Shay was the name of Slazo's ex-partner, and she posted a twit longer under the name at FizzyPop. While Slazo did not have to expose his face through the response to the allegations, he did have to kind of put a lot of really embarrassing text messages that expose a lot of personal details. So while Slazo wasn't somebody who didn't show his face. He did not mention any personal details really in any of his videos, besides a couple of anecdotes here and there about being very poor while growing up and having a lot of people living in the same house.
Why she said that and why she thinks that, or if she does. And now obviously I don't have a recording of a Skype call from like 2016, but I do have plenty of evidence from very early on in the relationship where she clearly made no intention to wait until 16. That was never clear to me. I never got that impression, and I don't know why she's saying that. There was a very two-way thing here, albeit a very awkward teenage two-way thing, but it was a two-way thing. Most of the messages I won't release for both of our sakes. They're kind of inherently embarrassing, but they definitely exist, and I never got this impression. There's actually one message where she says that she wants to wait until 16 before doing anything, and that is from January 2018. After our relationship ended. So maybe this is what she meant. I'm not sure how it's too relevant. We'd broken up, but we intended to get back together after I moved out, which never happened. But she could be referring to this, but if she is, I don't know why.
I was actually a very big fan of Slazo's. I really liked his videos and I watched every single upload. And it's really unfortunate to say that these allegations were very career ruining for him. Slazo made a point to specifically parallel the Twitlonger with screenshots that responded to the allegations. All of this was based on being a young teenager and making a lot of stupid young teenager kind of decisions. And I've mentioned before that this happens in young relationships, and the online narratives often contort teenage and young adult relationships into fully grown adult contexts. And the timeframes of ages involved are not necessarily super important, and they actually are often ignored. That being said, I had mentioned this in my, I believe it was called like lesbian TikTok video. Things like consent can be a bit more unclear to children, as most complex aspects are unclear. Does that mean children are allowed to assault each other? No. But does that mean that if, because think about how media portrays a lot of things, right? A lot of these like kisses in the rain where somebody's just standing there and someone forces a kiss upon them, right? As adults that is an unconsensual act. However, when that is perpetrated in a lot of like young adult literature, media, etc., people often think that they're doing like a daring romantic action. Now, am I saying that that's a situation that a lot of people are saying? Not at all. But what I'm saying is, think about where you were at that time. We're talking 14 and 16 years old here too. That's the thing. We're not talking like 19, 20. We're talking like children. Not that these actions are not bad, but I don't think should be applied to the person in their adult context, especially if there is some sort of reconciliation that has at least been attempted, which in Slazo's case there has been. Essentially, the main kind of points that Slazo was addressing was that he tried to reconcile these things as a young teen, and he tried to even more recently kind of talk to his ex-girlfriend. Just like the Quite situation, which we will detail later for those of you who are not aware, there is this clear kind of notion of like, I felt like things were going to be fine, and I thought that things were fine, and then I am kind of just out of nowhere, these things come up. Even the same thing with Pyrocynical. It had been several years of silence. And you could argue again that things with the power dynamics and the worrying about the kind of person's social media presence, etc., that's fine. But there are added details that need to be viewed there. She claimed that Slazo forced herself upon her and made her uncomfortable in their relationship. Slazo claimed that the allegations were exaggerated with many lies tied throughout, and that he even tried to work things out with her. He even offered to give her money, not necessarily as a payoff, but like if she needed help for anything because of how bad he felt for the trauma that he felt that he might have caused her.
Number 4 also comes from I Am Alex. Alex claimed he had seen evidence that Slazo tried to pay Shay off, but it had been omitted from the original Twitlonger. When Alex confronted Hyojin and her friends, the answer he got was that they withheld evidence purposely to prepare for Slazo's response. So the question to you is, did you attempt to pay Shay off? And if so, why?
By pay off, I'm not,
Pay her to keep quiet. That's what they're, saying.
No, no, I've gone through messages to try to see an instance of that. I perhaps at one point feeling guilty asked her, hey, can I give you money to make it right, Like,
But what would you
yeah,
feel guilty
that
about?
passed, but being a terrible boyfriend, you know.
So this is a career-altering event where only 9 videos have been posted on the Slazo channel since that point, and the last video was over 2 years ago. So that means in the last 4 years, there have only been 9 videos. Slazo seems to have lost all desire to post his own videos or interacting with anyone online. The occasional random shitpost tweet or random shitpost on Instagram, but other than that, seemingly nothing. And I even went through the subreddit r/Slazo, and it's turned to a place where people post every couple of months hoping the Slazo will return, and that's about it. Slazo seems to have kind of put all his eggs in the basket of the MK channel, which is a Reddit channel that has fostered a lot of subscribers. And he seems to run a bit of a kind of media company out of that. But point is, he has kind of lost all will to be a presence on social media due to the reaction to these allegations. And I can understand that because unlike White and Pyrocynical to the same extent, it was a narrative being pushed by prominent and trusted creators on top of the entire internet scene. And I remember like all of his comments being flooded with clown emojis, all of his posts being flooded with them. Everyone was just absolutely obsessed with the idea of putting this man out of the internet sphere entirely. Now we're going to detail the 2 sets of Pyrocynical allegations. So in 2016, as I said, I have this in more detail in my 2016 YouTube video. Keemstar alleged that Pyrocynical invited a minor to a furry convention, but at the time, Pyrocynical would have been about 18 years old. So 18, 19 years old, was saying that he had been texting minors and flirting with them up to the ages of 15, then 14, then 13. The more recent claims, which came around 2020, were that someone named Ivory had been groomed by Pyrocynical from the ages of 15, 16 when Pyrocynical was 19, 20-ish. The interesting thing about the Keemstar allegations in 2016 is that they came directly as an opposition to a video where Pyrocynical kind of criticized Keemstar on his reporting on Tabascus allegations, saying that he should have stated they were alleged. And the thing about that is that this is why they were able to be discredited so easily in 2016, because they clearly were in like Keemstar's back pocket, and he was not using them because he felt like he liked Pyrocynical at the time. Pyro escaped the allegations needing further detail because of Keem's obvious inconsistency to his claims as well as clear ulterior motives.
Opening that describes the issues at hand and that maybe there's no certain idea of what actually happened yet.
And Tabascus rant. A video in which I suggested to Keemstar that he should have verbally said that the controversy around Toby Turner's rape was an allegation, mainly because literally 20 minutes after Keemstar's video went public, all of Toby's channels were flooded with hateful comments and dislikes of people.
Keemstar, for some reason, lost his absolute shit on Twitter. Started making all these videos, the famous line of like, if you're gonna swing, I'm gonna swing 10 times harder back. That's one of the Keemstar rants that he made in those Twitter videos. And yeah, it was simply because Pyrocynical said that you should be more careful with allegations when you are making a statement on something like this, where people are not really sure what's happening yet. In like the YouTube culture now, people are a lot more careful with what a lot of people say allegedly. They'll say like, we don't know what's happening yet, and because a lot of these situations have come forward and dissolved and come back and swung in a lot of different directions. In the various Keemstar Twitter rampages, he actually, like I mentioned before, doxed Pyrocynical by putting a picture of Pyrocynical from his private Facebook on Twitter, which is something that had never really been shown before. Pyrocynical seems to have had some sort of a desire for privacy, among other things, and was really upset that he got doxxed, and people were making videos of like Pyrocynical face reveal and things like that. Pyrocynical talked about it on Twitter, I believe, and then, which again, you can't really check because that Pyrocynical Twitter account got nuked in like 2018, and Pyrocynical got Twitter back like last week. So Pyrocynical had used pictures of Keemstar on his Twitter before, but Keemstar was a public figure who showed his face very frequently, so this is a very different situation, despite how Keemstar wanted to make that comparison. Then Keemstar made a bunch of rampage videos continuing on from that point, saying not Twitter, he did on live stream, and he said that Pyrocynical asked a prominent YouTuber to go with him to a furry convention, and was just saying that Pyrocynical was a furry. Pyrocynical denied these allegations at the time. Apparently, due to the scandal that happened last year, there was some truth to that as far as what he was into, but not as far as like the actual situation that happened. But Pyrocynical it was being alleged that he was dating some sort of 15-year-old French girl. But then Pyrocynical in his video regarding Keemstar showed a sequence of how Keemstar would change the age all the time.
Pyro was trying to hook up with a 13-year-old girl from France. all right? That he was technically like a pedo or a weirdo or something, right?
This story is total bullshit. I know exactly the 3 individuals who told Keem and even got in a Skype group chat with him. Unfortunately, I can't name these twats because that's exactly what they want, attention. But in case you don't believe me, I have a DM conversation between one of the individual's ex-girlfriends who's shown that he actually has no idea what he's talking about and he's literally just making stuff up to spite me. Now, this all originated a couple months ago when Keemstar DM'd me asking if I've been dating a 15-year-old girl. And then later, after I made a video criticizing Keemstar about the allegations, he then includes it in a Twitter video against me.
Oh, and Pyro, do you remember those YouTubers that used to be friends with before he blew up and like fucked them off? You know how they've been contacting me saying that you've been dating some like 14-year-old French girl and shit? Just please swing at me. If you're gonna swing at me, dude. Let me know because I got fucking files on top of files to swing back at.
Now, I don't know whether you heard that. Let me just play that again.
You know how they've been contacting me saying that you've been dating some like 14-year-old French girl and shit? Dating some like 14-year-old French girl and shit? 14-year-old French girl and shit? 14-year-old French girl and shit?
Now, if any of you didn't notice that, he just deliberately lowered the age. Now, originally, this alleged girl was 15, and now Keemstar has lowered the age to 14, probably to make it sound even more impacting and incriminating. And guess what? Later on stream, he lowered the age again to say the girl was now 13, and on top of that, basically insinuating that I was a paedophile.
Pyro was trying to hook up with a 13-year-old girl from France, all right? That he was technically like a pedo or a weirdo or something, right?
Where it went from 15, 14, and then 13-year-old, alleging that Pyrocynical was a nonce, as they would say. However, Pyrocynical at the time too was only 18 years old, and Keemstar was like, wait, if Keemstar's 40 now, or he's turning 40, Keemstar was like 34, 35 years old, coming at this 18-year-old and then doing all of this stuff.
Now, when we get to the claims in 2020, Pyrocynical had to face the allegations more directly, given that it was somebody that did not really have a, consistent online presence, and that the accuser, Ivory, had waited a few years and was young when these things happened. Pyrocynical was messaging Ivory in 2017 when Pyrocynical was 19 and Ivory was 15 years old. And they were talking about fictional furry roleplay. Woo, like things like yiffing furry farts? Is that what he said? And then not bloat. There's a term for when like they're big. I clearly don't know anything about this, like as far as like the nuances of kink. I'm really not somebody who's comfortable with kind of sexual situations. I've never really have been, so it's this makes my hands sweaty. So the first response that Pyrocynical had was this long text post on r/Pyrocynical. On the subreddit, Niall attempted to address the grooming allegations like in details in sections, whilst not entirely getting into the nitty-gritty of like the exact conversations. This is similar to what Slazo had to do, where even though Pyrocynical's face was out there, he's been a pretty private person. Pyrocynical, if you've noticed, doesn't really do collab videos, hangs out with a couple people here and there, like Max Mofo and Anything for Views here and there, whatever. And then he has the podcast now a few years later with Dolan Dark, Nerd City, and Colossal's Crazy. And when we break down the Quite situation as well, there's going to be more of those kind of embarrassing details that have to come up, because the thing is that the level of satisfaction that people require has gone to this like extreme level because of the consistent digging at every single aspect that the commentary community has been doing and the precedent that they have set. And we'll get more into that down the line. Once posting on the subreddit, YouTuber Turkey Tom made a 19-page Google Doc going through the post and breaking down what he considered to be inconsistencies throughout. This prompted Pyrocynical's infamous video called My Response. The response video essentially was scripted based on contradicting every single point in Turkey Tom's Google Doc, and added any personal details needed to waive the allegations, where he had to admit to liking what he considered to be degenerate furry roleplay. Pyrocynical did admit to not being diligent enough about ages, and there was no nature of it like a true sexual relationship, which would be like an actual sense of grooming based on the definition.
For those who haven't read the entirety of my original response, let me give a little background. When I was 19 and 20, I liked to take part in this degenerate furry roleplay with pretty much anyone that would reciprocate. And looking back on it now, the word cringe, that doesn't near do enough justice to how sad this all was. These conversations never led to any nudes being exchanged. It was just purely fantasy garbage, something which Ivory himself confirms.
Did he ever ask you for nudes? No.
What these people look like, their gender, these weren't variables. Like, I could have been doing this with a 90-year-old cave troll and it wouldn't have made a difference. It was roleplay after all. You're just pretending. Now, it turns out my accuser, Ivory, one of the people that I've had these conversations with, was 15. That is 3 to 4 years younger than I was. It was entirely my responsibility to verify his age before having these conversations. And the fact that I didn't, that is so incredibly negligent of me to do so. I may have been young myself, but still old enough to know better. But let me be very clear. I had absolutely no idea that he was 15. I absolutely did not lie in my original Reddit post, and I would like to emphasize that. Ivory himself did not disclose to me directly that he was 15, and the evidence itself supports this too. Up until September this year, I'd be perfectly cool with him. We were still speaking and still on very good terms.
While slightly dicey, and Pyrocynical did apologize for the events that happened a few years ago, you also need to acknowledge that Pyrocynical is now roughly, I think, 25 years old. He's born in 97 or 98. I can't remember which one. So he's either 25, but his birthday I think is in May. I don't know why I know that. He's like 25, okay, like give or take. So to even just have to think back to that time frame too is a bit difficult, right? Obviously, for obvious reasons. While slightly dicey, again, based on not, proving the ages and things like that. There was no exchange of nudes. It was kind of just like DeviantArt comment sections. So, which I've had to learn about that too through this career. Ugh. Anyways, so finally now, to close kind of this cycle that I'm noticing, I'm going to parallel everything to the Quite allegations. I did not want to talk about these because of the fatigue that I've been feeling due to the precedent set by the commentary community through the glamorization and kind of fame based on exposure of allegations. And I will combat and directly address my role in that further in the video. So do not worry that I'm like, oh, I'm so innocent. Everybody sucks except for me. No, we're not going to be doing that. I'll get to that down the line. On February 22nd of this year, so a little bit over a month ago from recording this video, someone named Orion put out a tweet longer again, claiming that Quite was a rapist who was emotionally abusive and transphobic against him. So to clarify 100% to what I recall, Orion was at the beginning of his transition at this time with Quite and went by he, him pronouns except in his home because of transphobic parents. That's what I've gathered through this whole thing. The allegations were the only one of the three people I just described that were accusations of outright rape. Pyrocynical was grooming through inappropriate sexual conversations, and Slazo was sexual assault as far as like touching and things like that. But like the only ones that were accusations of like direct full-on intercourse were the Orion Quite allegations. Now, am I saying that one is necessarily worse than the other? No, I'm trying to clarify the differences in each of the circumstances just for the sake of getting all the details right. So the claims were that Quite was taking advantage of Orion and then dished Orion upon Quite's YouTube success. In the hour-and-a-half long response video, Quite reveals his face, given being doxxed in the allegations. This was the hesitance I mentioned before, where people are forced to either get rid of their anonymity based on their personality, their face, or both. So Pyrocynical and Quite had to do both. Slazo had to expose personal details about himself, but also because of the difference with Slazo was because of the prominent YouTubers coming out, felt the need to kind of do interviews and things like that, because with other also prominent YouTubers to kind of clarify his stance on the platform. But the positioning of the interviews I find also to be disingenuous, because I find that like the commentary community has this strive for this like debate culture. But I don't think you need like to be hammering on to somebody when they've been like forced into hiding and you're not 100% sure of the truth of anything is necessarily appropriate. And while it gets you views, I suppose, because Nicholas Diorio, I believe, said he had 4,000 subscribers at that time. And now he has like 200,000, I want to say. I'll check. I'll put the little channel thingy here there in editing because I'm not 100% sure. It's the same thing as like Pay Money Wubby, like interviewing Gus Johnson after those allegations came out. I find it to just be a bit distasteful, personally. But the key component in each of the mentioned false allegations is the state of personal information, and this from seemingly very private people. Quite had to reveal his face, that he was a virgin, his uncomfortability around any sexual situations, and a past of self-harm because of the allegations. Slazo had to essentially detail every point of his first real relationship and all of the uncomfortable conversations that they had between each other. If I had to detail everything about my first relationship online, I would literally lose my mind. It was like I was 15, right? So it was just like very cringe. Like it wasn't like, I didn't assault my boyfriend, obviously, but it's like just thinking about like conversations of like how important a first kiss is and like oh, you're looking at that guy for, you know what I mean? It's like things like that. It's like, it's so embarrassing. Some things are meant to stay off the internet, and to be forced because of unsubstantiated claims is really disheartening for me. This obviously adds to the point of false allegations and manipulating the truth, which adds a major stress to those who have been actually victimized by SA. Friend of the channel, and by that I mean usual on Twitter, iNabber, made a really good video about the quiet allegations and discussing this process, and I will link it down below. I watched that iNabber video upon scripting this towards the end, and it was interesting because of how many overlaps we had actually had. But I just want to understand that the points that I've made and have substantiated were made prior to watching that video. But given the strong overlap, I'm still going to credit Fraser down below. So one thing I want to bring in, which will bridge into another situation as well, is the general fatigue around all of this. Because on one hand, people don't want to wait for the details to be put out. It puts a weight and expectation on creators to address things prior to the situation being finalized. And I find that it puts a major stress on our lives as people who are making commentary because of a precedent set by people that we don't really have any relationship with. And I want to say that I'm not saying like this is the worst job ever, because I have to talk, no. But the thing is like, I just remember seeing all the stuff coming out about Quiet and then me just having like no energy to even try to begin to understand it, because I was like, if this ends up being another Slazo situation, the flack and everything that will have to come from it, and the way that I would have to position myself and how other people are going to have to position themselves is just going to further degrade any honesty or relationships with the commentary community and their subscribers. It's just sad because I remember reading the twit longer, feeling that things were a little off and wanting to wait, and then feeling really bad that I felt that way and having no idea how to handle those feelings. Here on the screen is just like, I'm not going to reveal my DMs with the person who sent it to me, but just my immediate response to receiving these allegations. I'll put the little picture on the bottom here. Point is, it harms everyone. Not only the nature of the false allegations, but the nature of the reporting. Because now there's an environment of victim blaming for those who are taken advantage of, a general sense of apathy from those who would report it, and a feeling of a lack of safeness for those who could potentially be silenced on true allegations given the nature of the internet environment. So we're going to bridge into recent allegations that I have been again asked to report on, and I want to discuss that here because there is a creator called We're in Hell that is being kind of disregarded in the commentary community again because of allegations that have been put out from him and an ex-partner. About a year ago, if not a little more, I released a video called The Rhetoric and Impact of No More Lies, where I talked about the evolution of YouTuber apologies and statements and the reality of the response and the weight that a response has on a career, but as well as the environment surrounding that person's community. So there, in that and in this video as well, there are 3 points of rhetoric that are prominent in the act of apology. 1, the ethos, which is the reputation of the creator, particularly prior to the allegations. This is why people like Jeffree Star get just consistently dogged on if they do try to address anything, just because their ethos is so bad. 2, the element of kairos, which means timing which just means overall timing to response, which in this case would be allegation response. And 3, apologia, the art of apology or response. This constitutes formatting, platform, structure, position, and the way that you would be addressing it. As of right now, the allegations towards We're in Hell, to which he responded, are only through a Twitter Notes app apology, which is considered kind of a cliche admission of guilt through the internet sphere because of people like James Charles. I believe Logan Paul did that too. There's been quite a few creators that have done that in the past. There is currently no video response as of scripting and recording this video. But we're going to go through what he posted, which is by no means me validating the truth of anything because I don't feel like that's my place anymore. And I'm just doing this to establish the point of that kind of fatigue and the stresses that are there. It reads as such, and I'll put my annotated versions on the screen so you can see like my immediate feelings about it. My ex-partner, who I'll be referring to simply as M to avoid sending any unwanted attention their way, has recently made public some very important grievances they have with me regarding the way I behaved during relationship and after the breakup. I want to apologize for the harm I caused them as well as for taking so long to address them in detail. Thank you in advance for those who have taken the time to read this in full. So again, this is another element of a bad relationship that someone had with somebody. This is different than allegations like the James Charles ones or the Harvey Weinstein or anything like that, where it's just serial attacks on people, right? So there's kind of like 2 nuanced kind of sides on this, with 2 types of allegations that come forward. And a majority of the issues with allegations are people digging into ones like this. Whether that makes this true or not, I'm not saying that, but I'm just bringing up that point. While several aspects of what I've been accused of are not accurate, I want to make two things clear. Nothing I'm saying absolves me of causing harm. Secondly, I do not believe that any of the inaccuracies I'll be addressing were made out of malice, and I want to state in the strongest possible terms that no one should say anything I say here to harass or in any way attack M, who, as I understand it, is simply trying to move on with their life. No one is under any obligation to believe me, and I wouldn't want to uncritically accept what I'm about to say. All accusations should be taken seriously, and my statement should be examined with a critical eye. So I stated that poses a bit of a contradiction. Do you want to be believed or do you want to be criticized? It just kind of was confusing to me. I feel like that's people caving to the nature of the commentary community. Being like, I respect what you have to say about it, because if I said I didn't respect it, that would almost be an admission of guilt in and of itself. With that said, there's nothing I can do and give my honest account of what happened and take responsibility. The following is the truth to the best of my knowledge. From February 2021 to May 2022, I was in a long-distance relationship that by all accounts did not work. There is in no small part to me being an awful partner, similar to Slazo's admission. Some of the things I've always struggled with in relationships are communication, listening, prioritizing my partner, as well as being forgetful and a flake. All things that are especially important when you're in a long-distance relationship. I was extremely neglectful, which would lead to fights, leading me to promising to do better and then failing, rinse, and repeat. My partner had every right to be unhappy in the relationship, and ultimately, we broke up in a way that we both agree was extremely messy. I'm not bringing that up to play victim, but to explain why I was sad, angry, and believed it had been wronged, which led me to acting in ways that were embarrassing, immature, and petty. I made sophomoric tweets, posted breakup song lyrics, and privately trashed them to our friends. While my actions were bad in their own right, having subsequently found the true reason for our breakup, I now realize that how I acted hurt M far more than I realized, and I'm deeply sorry for that. And I said that's a position of ignorance to the situation, but at the same time, like, you're allowed to, like, I find like it's like, I don't know, not saying that you're allowed to trash your ex, but to be unhappy with a relationship ending is a very human emotion to feel. And it sounds like I'm defending him. It's more, and you'll find when we read down, this is just a very confusing situation and response. That's why I'm like, not sure how to feel about it. Around a month after the breakup, M reached out to discuss issues in our relationship. They gave me their perspective on the incident that occurred during the last time they visited me. That night, M went to bed several hours earlier than me as I stayed up late editing a video. When I got into bed, I tried to wake them up to initiate sex, forgetting that they take powerful medications to help them sleep. When they didn't respond, I stopped and went to sleep. I genuinely want to show that I'm committed to being better, and it is imperative to me that nothing remotely like this happens again. But I don't think the correct path to making what happened is to be sober, because the problem was not alcohol. When I told my mutual friend, now acting as a mediator, about this, their response was that in order for me to set things right, I needed to make some kind of change that demonstrated that could never happen again. They said that unless I could prove that I was making clear change in some other way, therapy, which I started attending at this time, didn't count. I needed to be in AA, which I described was a similar situation to Andrew Callahan's allegations. It's sort of kind of Band-Aid. And I don't think things like AA should be used as Band-Aid solutions for relationship issues. I find that's conflating two very different things, and someone kind of posing expectations that are not related to the issue at hand. I believe very strongly in accountability, unless their issue was like being drunk and violent. Okay, which in the case of Andrew Callahan was more so the case. Regardless of my intentions, one thing that's undeniable is that real and very serious harm was done, and M deserves to see me taking steps to ensure I never behave this way again. But I don't know how to achieve that. I haven't directly asked M because of their trauma from my actions and not wanting to re-trigger it or make it worse. I reached out to several people to try to find out this information from M, but they indicate they do not want to be involved further. I have asked what I should do to make things right, but I'm told that I need to get that from M. I'm not saying that any of these other people are responsible for helping me appropriately address this. My previous attempt at making things right has been called insufficient, so at this point I am unsure what to do. So that's the thing, right? Is that these are deeply personal details that are being unearthed, and it's like, at what point are some of these things private elements? But again, me even having to ask that makes me feel like I'm looking into like someone's underwear drawer, if hypothetically, you know what I mean, like as a metaphor, where I'm like, this is just the way that the internet has pushed people to this point. It just makes me feel very saddened. During the mediation, I was working on a video about pickup artists. I asked the mediator if releasing a video on this topic would be alright with M or if I should scrap it. I was told that making a video would be fine only if I acknowledged the situation in the video. I had assumed that it was coming from M, and while I was still hesitant about making it, I trusted in the instructions given to me by the mediator and proceeded with the video. I've seen a lot of criticism of me having done this in the video, claiming that I was making content out of the situation. Let me clarify that I agree that doing so would have been entirely inappropriate, and so the video makes no specific references to this situation. Furthermore, the only reason why any reference is included and why the video exists at all is because I was following instructions that I received from the mediator. And I was saying that is why a video should be made, because you tend to want to address things on the same platform as your primary focus. But around that time I was working on the video, M traveled to the city that I live in. They went to a bar with a friend of mine that a friend of mine worked at and recognized them and told me. At this time, I still thought that a friendly reconciliation was their goal, and due to serious life events outside of their control, our mediator was extremely hard to get in touch with. I figured I'd reach out to M directly to offer them the reconciliation that I believe they wanted as well. And yes, ask them if they'd be okay with my video. Not for them to appear in it, and I'm not sure where that idea got started. In retrospect, this was a huge mistake and I should not have directly contacted them. The unexpected contact after months of silence understandably was very upsetting for them, and for that I deeply apologize. My understanding from M was that they received this as a drunken mistake, but that it was extremely frightening and made them uncomfortable for the rest of their visit. I took it seriously and apologized, and I didn't realize how much it affected them, as it was brought up only as a small part of a larger discussion about a relationship. Had I known how deeply this had traumatized M, I would have immediately committed to an accountability process and worked to aid M's healing in whatever they saw fit. What happened was a serious error on my part, but the motives which M has ascribed to me are seriously inaccurate and deeply upsetting. I tried to initiate sex that night out of a genuine desire for connection with my partner, in one of the ways we often initiated sex with each other. I stopped as soon as I realized M was not responding. I do not dispute M's claims that they did not want sex that night. A person cannot want sex in a relationship for any reason, and it should always be respected. But it is important to make that clear. Before I tried to initiate sex, M did not in any way indicate that they were withholding it as they claimed. If they had, I would have never have touched them. M has now published an account of what happened that is simply not what happened. After 2 months later, a mutual friend reached out to tell me that M had said that I had assaulted them. The mutual friend told me that both they and M believed that this was caused by me having a drinking problem. The friend said that in order to make things right, I needed to quit drinking, start attending AA, and down the line have a mediated reconciliation with M. My understanding now is that the reconciliation was something that the friend was pushing for, but M didn't want. This was not made clear to me at this time. So I said a lot of this seemed to have mostly boiled down to like messy relationship dynamics. And again, for this to have been pushed online is very confusing to me. M has since repeatedly stated that I'm an alcoholic. I believe that this comes from I believe that where this comes from is that they drink very little and would see me at times where I drink the most, i.e. when I take a week off from work and want to go partying because my long distance partner was visiting. I recognize that this belief comes from a place of concern, but it is not true. I know it's difficult to prove, but I'm definitely in no position to ask for trust, but I'm not an alcoholic. My therapist, who coincidentally specializes in alcoholism among other things, does not think I'm an alcoholic. I do not meet the criteria. Alcohol does not have a disruptive role in my life. My friends and family don't think I'm an alcoholic. While I'm a social drinker, I don't drink to numb my emotions or feel compelled to drink at any time. Regardless, I went to my first AA meeting that night. When I told them I didn't think I was an alcoholic, they suggested I try not drinking for 90 days to see. I did that with no real difficulty other than a bit of awkwardness at social events stemming from feeling weird being the only person not drinking. If anyone reading this spent any significant amount of time with me honestly thinks I'm an alcoholic, please reach out to me. And I said this expands far past a relationship and feels slightly forceful on the part of the friends at this point. Communication with the mediator has made difficult and infrequent by continued circumstances outside of their control. And around the end of August, I stopped hearing from them. In the first week of September, M made a public post stating I'd sexually assaulted them. I responded by releasing an apology that has since been viewed as inadequate. The mediator has never spoken to me about any of this since the end of August. I probably could have done more to stay in touch, but it seemed better to finish my 90 days of sobriety and continue doing the work in therapy myself instead. M was indicated that I should have reached out to apologize. From our last correspondence, I assumed this was something they definitely didn't want, but I'm open to doing it so they can help heal from this. As I said, I didn't know what accountability should look like here, but things haven't been made right yet, and I commit myself to doing that. I just want to do what I can to help Em in their recovery process and understand that means more than just an apology. Ultimately, this is between Em and I. This should go without saying that harassment towards them is entirely unacceptable. On the same note, I do not plan to make public updates about this process, and I ask for you to please respect that this is not simply internet drama or entertainment, but real people's lives. I won't be posting any videos and will be staying off social media for the time being. I just said this is a sentiment that I agree with. To Em, I'm sincerely sorry for the harm that I caused you, and I wish that apology could heal your pain, but unfortunately, I don't think life works that way, and so I'll be taking time to put an effort towards aiding in your healing and being a positive force in the world. Whatever form that may take. Sam. This whole ordeal has been a topic of conversation that I've been requested to talk about quite a few times in like a specific dedicated video, but as you probably just noticed, I didn't have too much to say about it. But I do want to reflect on the overall environment on something that I want to end with. This is my final, I believe my final section before the conclusion. Yeah. The commentary kind of community's role in all of this. The night after I scripted a majority of this video, I watched Paige Christie's stream on Twitch talking about commentary, drama, and tea communities. I also want to say before we get into this, I have explicit consent from Paige Christie in the DMs. I'll just put like the one DM there that I am allowed to use this video. Before we get further into that, I want to reflect further on the most viewed video on the channel where I talked about drama in the beauty community. And we're talking about the most viewed video on my channel. And in there's a point where I rejoice over the fact that the drama was over. This is talking about like Mascara Gate and entitled beauty influencers. And that the drama was over a mascara and discount codes, not something as serious as literal crimes and allegations. And this is a feeling that Paige also brings up pretty often in the stream. The stream was discussing the differences between the tea community, drama channels, and commentary channels. Paige Christie, formerly known as Petty Paige, once made primarily drama channel content on YouTube, but has now kind of moved on to more formally structured video essay type content. And with that, she has thus been a part of a few different communities and has described her experiences within them. When Paige was referencing the commentary community, she was referring to those who revolve around Keemstar, who some, such as myself, have referred to the commentary bros. This would consist of Turkey Tom, Xylee Gets Reeled, Salvo, Nicholas Diorio, Bo Blacks, kind of that general circle. This is not the commentary that I suppose I would typically be associated with. If there is one that I'm associated with, if there is, I'd actually genuinely like to know for the sake of kind of how I constructed this video. So if you think I'm associated with a certain community, please tell me who you think it is. But Paige described this feeling that these commentary channels have a feeling of authority over points of view, which I do think is not only true, but a very toxic point of thought. And I really feel like this one clip from Nicholas Diorio's video about Slazo perfectly encapsulates that point that she was referring to.
This has a lasting impact on him, and it's an incredibly serious situation that has been mishandled in the worst possible way. You guys have lost your privilege of being in charge of the narratives and when things become public. I'll take that off your hands because you have fundamentally fucked this entire op up for the better part of 2 months. Alex, Shay, Hyojin, King Annie, Bluesdank, and everyone else shouldn't be credited as a source for basically anything in the future. I personally think their opinions on any future trending topic should be ignored entirely. It's a good thing a few of them are in the Reddit community, a place where critical thinking isn't integral to being successful.
Paige then mentions a group chat with creators not disclosing who, makes perfect sense, and said that people would use the chat to create a general consensus in their community prior to making points and videos, and would then boost each other's posts as a result, kind of uplifting a specific angle on something, often one that I noticed is quite contrarian, which is interesting for the sake of kind of the scandal, which is interesting from a community that prides themselves on like logic and, you know, no bullshit, but then allegedly, hypothetically in Minecraft, likes to make consensuses with each other. I don't talk to anybody before I make videos in the sense of like what I should say. I've never done that. If sometimes I'll talk to someone directly about a situation, such as my Eleanor Neal part 2, where the sibling of Joy Morgan reached out to me, but that's a different situation entirely. I've never talked to other commentary channels being like, what do you think the vibes of this are, what I should say, whatever. I've had conversations with topics afterwards, but I don't recall I've ever really done that. I even make a point to not watch other videos before at least beginning the scripting process. So this issue kind of comes with the nature of the content. Now, creator Tommy C did an interview about this, which Paige did play on the Twitch stream. Tommy C said that all commentary has become is conversations about allegations and fighting over who was right about the analysis of these claims.
Tipsy just said some of the biggest creators in the early days of commentary, Leafy, Pyrocynical, Colossal is Crazy, etc., started as gameplay commentators. Exactly. Okay, so let's take a look.
That's the great thing about the United States. It's like a bunch of little countries in one. These could be the final days. I think I'm about done with this shit as far as doing it professionally or paying the bills with it much longer. I've had a chat with my wife. And I think I'm just about done. I think I'm done. The strike gave me an incredible amount of time to think, but in that of being done, I'm definitely going to be doing things the way I want to, which could result in fading into oblivion or actually rejuicing it. So I had a long talk with Colossal Crazy. I had a lot of time on my hands, which sucked. Even my German teacher got COVID, so I couldn't even I really didn't do much of anything but watch sports for a week. So it gave me the time to think. So Matt and Clown and I came up with there's some really big changes coming towards and some of them people aren't really gonna like. I think I might, my next video that I upload, which will probably be today, I might lose a few people. I think, but I decided like if this is gonna be it, I'm gonna do things my own way. I'm gonna cover things of my interest, and because the commentary has moved away from my interest, which were gaming drama, internet memes, and stuff like that. It is almost exclusively, and this is from my friends too, degeneracy. It has become a witch hunt mentality in this community. I mean, what was I seeing that the people actually arguing this hebephilia, pedophilia thing? And this is like common stuff. And this is like common stuff. And I see two sides of that argument. There's like the one side of that argument that is just like it's just silly to get hung up on names. And there's the other side of the argument. Well, of course there's a fucking difference. There's a difference between raping a fucking 6-year-old and statutory rape. There's a difference. But what are we doing this? We've ruined this community. I got to talk to a lot of people outside this community that were like former stars or they moved on and kind of ascended. They just think it's a fucking joke. I mean, I'm talking like really talented people. They think this whole thing is a giant fucking joke. While I'm not criticizing what's popular as far as like, if that gets your go going, and I don't think that any of this stuff is should be banned or people should be striked off of YouTube, but it doesn't mean I have to like it, and it doesn't mean I have to support it in any really real way. Whereas a kind of an oddball sex story would have been pretty good for clicks and maybe funny in some aspect or another. That's all there is, and it's been that way since like 2019. I've kind of fought against it, failed, and it just seems to be getting more degenerate. And I think that the degeneracy is not only the actions, but it's the obsession. It goes beyond funny. It becomes grandstanding. And like how brave do you have to be to grandstand against like child pornography? Like that's not a brave stance. That's not even interesting after a while. It's not funny. It's not why I signed up. I mean, I signed up because I thought Keemstar was funny and all the wacky things that went around. And it is literally are stuck in debates with children that are only trying to regurgitate what will get popular on the internet. So like none of the debates really solve anything. It's just more of it's a video game. It's competition, and it's not funny. And it's really I'm starting to look like a guy like Charlie.
Which often, if the claims end up being false, I've noticed misogyny goes crazy with that, where they're fighting people who oppose them, often women, and a whole kind of point divulges in there. But I've made a video on that a couple years ago at this point. I don't really want to touch on that again. And the devolving, I think, comes from the sensationalization of claims and allegations, as well as the responsibility of creators to talk about those things. The pressure of getting the video out first, the pressure of being the one who's right. And that's why often I find that creators in this kind of commentary community will be contrarian, because if they happen to be right, there's a slim few. It's like when you bet on a horse, and this is a weird analogy, I understand. But like, if 90% of people bet double or nothing on, horse A, and then the other 10% vote on horse B, and horse B does win, they get way more winnings than even if the 90% got their winnings divided amongst them. And I don't know how much that necessarily makes sense, but that's the only thing I can think of. So a lot of people are starting to kind of fly solo, for lack of a better term. People are kind of in this position of feeling uncomfortable with these conversations, myself included. And I want to talk about my role a little bit. I understand that I've reported on allegations. I understand that I've talked about these things. I've tried to avoid it a little bit more. I only talk about these things when both sides have typically come out and I can kind of look into things. And typically, again, upon request. But there's some that I do think are very important, like when we're talking about Abelina, Sabrina, and Gus Johnson, because that attaches itself also to female reproductive rights and other sorts of healthcare. Or when we're talking about Sienna May, where it's someone who is being aggressive and forceful to young audiences and is potentially dangerous. So her actions are spanning beyond the allegations. So that's another position in which I decided to talk about that. But if you've noticed, I tend to be very cherry picky with these things because I feel like there needs to be a legitimate conversation besides who's right and who's wrong and false allegations bad. Because I feel like there's too much content on that, there's too much sensationalization on that, and I feel like it does further damage outside of the YouTube platform. But with that, I'm going to conclude the video. In conclusion, sometimes I feel like I lose track of those who are on the other side of the screen. And I feel like other people do as well. And I want you to take the time to process what is presented on both sides of a situation, even understanding that victims should be believed. But don't jump completely into that to the sense that you're harassing somebody. Take that notion, understand it, and then await response. And if there is no indication of response and someone keeps it pushing, that's when you can lean into it, I find, in my opinion. The main thing I'm stating from this whole video is nuance, something that I find to be a little bit uncommon online, despite the fact that it should be. Point is, everything is down below. Thank you again to those who support the channel, as well as you for watching to this point. Have a good day, and take care of yourselves. And I'll see you when I see you. Bye.